Hi, it's Kamon Reynolds. In this video, I'm going to talk about when do we need to add a second brood chamber to our colonies we just started this year. This is a split that was made in April, and I think they're ready for another box. So if you're using foundation or if you have comb, we're going to talk about that in this video. We're also going to see what condition the colony is in, and then we're going to go from there. So let's get into the hive first and determine if they're ready for another box. Now my rule of thumb is if it's foundation, if we're getting them to draw foundation, when they start drawing on the 7th really good, the 7th frame in a 10 frame box, then it is time to add another box. If it's combs, around the 8th frame, and it's time to add some more combs to them. So yes, this hive is definitely ready. I probably should have already thrown a box on by now. Now I've got comb, so it's easier for me to come back from this, but if you were doing foundations, this would be a bad sign. Because look how much honey they have up towards the top. There's a lot of white wax towards the top, and they are filling this with honey, which is excellent. But if they have to draw foundations, it takes time. And if it takes 2 weeks to draw that out, or 10 days, in that amount of time, you could have 10, 15, 20 pounds of nectar come in easily, and more in a strong flow, and they'll pack that brood nest, and then they'll want to swarm. So first thing we want to do is see if this colony is wanting to swarm. So what we're going to do is just drop down below and look underneath. If they're going to swarm, there's going to be some cells underneath the cluster. Now the reason this one is in a single and not like the rest of them that are in doubles is it had some queen issues with the original queen, so we had to throw in another one. Wow, this is heavy. So I'm seeing a cup down in here. We're going to smoke them up a little bit. Excuse me. And I'm not seeing a lot of cups. I'm seeing one over here. And that one is dry. And this one is dry as well. So we're in good shape. Not all swarm cells are at the bottom. That is a myth. The queen will lay in cups that are on the sides of frames, and they'll swarm from that as well. Excuse me. But if they're going to swarm heavily, there's going to be at least some started at the bottom. That box is heavy. I think while they went through that queen transition, they focused really heavily on nectar, and this is something you need to know. So experienced beekeepers know this, but when you have a queen that gets superseded during a flow or anything like that, you don't have as much brood in the colony. But you have all these nurse bees that would have been attending brood, but they have no brood to attend to during that gap, so they go into a early forager mode because they've got to do something, and you'll get an increased amount of foragers and you have less brood, and brood takes energy, so there's less energy consumption and there's more foragers during the flow, and that's where they bring in extra resources for their size, and that queen comes back, and if they don't have a lot of extra room to put those resources that they brought in, then everything's bound up. Honey bound is what they call it, and it could be pollen bound too, or a combination of both. So now I'm going to show you how we add another box. Smoke follows beauty, they say. Now we are going to take this off. I don't always scrape it every time, but if we're drawing foundations especially, you don't want any burr comb on these top bars, because sometimes they will prefer, because this is comb, to raise this and go in between your frames of foundation, because this is comb. They love it. It's theirs. Foundation they don't recognize as theirs until they start drawing cells on it. And so they'll draw this quicker, and sometimes they'll go off of this first, and you'll end up with a mess between your combs. So we'll scrape that off, and now we're going to dive down into here, starting towards the edge, create a little bit of space, and then add a little bit of smoke to get the bees out of the way, and see where we're at. If we had foundation, we should have already had the foundation on by now. Like I said, foundation needs to go on by the time the bees have worked on their 7th frame of either foundation or comb. So this is an old brood comb right here. That's why it's towards the edge. And we are going to put that down. What I want to find now, whether we are adding foundation or comb, it's preferred if you bring up a frame of larvae. You can see how much resources this colony has. Again, this is because they went through a gap with their queen. Hey, see these bees fighting down in here? Well, they were rough and tumbling. Yeah, there it goes. They are going after small hive beetles coming out of these edge cells. That's good. We want them to rough them up, make their life stressful. Lots of nutrition and bee bread here. But we're not through the flow yet. Oh, there's larvae over in here. That is good. We could bring this frame up if we wanted to. Why would we bring a frame up? If it's foundation, again, they don't recognize that as theirs until there's cells on it. So bringing up a comb, especially with larvae in it, they have to go up and keep that larvae warm. And on top of that, a frame of larvae takes thousands of visits to feed them. So they have to bring up a lot of bees, and it'll make them draw that foundation a lot quicker. You can see how some of this is messed up. This is something good to notice as well. See all these drone cells intermixed with these worker cells? This is why we had to requeen this colony. Not all the broods cycled out yet, and unfortunately this comb will always stay like this, where you have some drone combs intermixed with a worker cell. But the other queen that we put in here did not get mated good enough, and she was shooting some blanks. And unfortunately, because of that, they were raising a lot of drones. So we did put a new queen in here. So she should be laying everything correctly now. And it looks to be the case. Good larvae in here. Lots of food. Kind of looking for the queen. Colonies that have poor queens do not draw foundation good at all. And this colony is definitely behind its counterparts. Yeah, man, that other queen just messed up some of these combs. You can see some more drone comb down in there. Kills me, but sometimes it happens. Good bit of honey. We're going to keep going. Until we find the frame that we want. Alright, this is looking a lot better. Alright, there's a lot of resources intermixed with some brood. I'm hoping the next frame will give us what we want. Lots of mixture of brood and food. Still not seeing a lot of larvae. It's intermixed all over the place. This is what happens when a colony gets honey or pollen bound, and she just cannot find a good frame to lay. That's why we got to get this other box on so they can move some of this honey and pollen out of the way. Let's see what's going on down here with these cells. They are both dry. Just there. We could rip those off if we wanted to. And haven't seen the queen yet. Lots of fresh nectar coming in. This colony is just out of balance. Ooh, that breeze feels good. Oh my goodness, you gotta be kidding me. Alright, this is the perfect frame right here. It is full of larvae down in there. It's starting to rain on us. Of course it is. Lots of eggs and things down in there. This is the exact frame that we would like to pull up into our foundation. And we want to put all these combs back the same way we found them as much as we possibly can. That's cold. Ah, killed a small hive beetle, 10 points. Alright, so we have our frame of eggs and larvae right here, which is a great frame to pull up into the foundation or into the combs. Now what are we going to do with this space here? You could space these to 9. Some beekeepers run 9 combs into a super. I prefer to keep it 10 these days. We have our box of foundations. So if I was going to drop a foundation down here to replace it, this rain feels really good, by the way. These bees will be okay. This isn't ideal, but they'll be alright. This frame only has honey. So we want to put the foundation next to that. We do not want to take a frame of brood and isolate that to the wall. We want this foundation to be on the edge, and they'll draw that out. Now I'm going to be using a box of combs, which makes life so much easier. And we can just throw this comb down in there instead. And I am going to trim this down a little bit. This is an old comb right here. It's still got the wires in it from wax foundation. I have not done that for over 10 years. So this comb is about time for it to be recycled, but it's done really well for me. We're going to take that off. And I've never seen any issues with keeping my combs a little bit longer like this. Alright. So now we're back down to 10. We got to make sure we scoot all these frames back together so our combs don't get fat and bee space is incorrect. And now if we were doing foundations, we would bring this up. And we are going to throw this larvae right down into the foundation. I'm going to use comb instead. And you want that larvae to be sure to be right above where the brood is below, so the mass majority of the heat comes up and keeps it warm. Now, when using foundation, use a quality foundation with plenty of wax. I really like Premier or Acorn foundation. They coat with a lot of wax. This is Premier foundation right here. I mean, I can just feel my fingernails sink into that. Some companies don't give you as much wax, and the more wax there is, the quicker they will use it and draw that out. But today, but today we are just going to be using a box of brood comb, and the bees can just quickly move that nectar or any extra pollen up into this box and get that clean, more laying room. And we are going to stick this frame of larvae just right down here into the center. And this will be ensure that they get plenty of attention. And we still have a good bit of our honey flow left, and since they have comb, we don't have to worry about feeding them right now because there's so much honey coming in, and they don't have to use any of that honey towards drawing wax, or very, very little of it. Now we just pop the lid on. If there's not a honey flow going on, make sure to give them some feed. And we're just going to knock those bees down in there. And that is how you give a first-year colony a little bit more room. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.